Hello, everyone. I'm Lynn Cormando for YogaUOnline, and it is my honor today to be here with master teacher and author Bernie Clark. You may know Bernie through one of his, is it still 7 books, Bernie, or did you write another one?
Yeah.
I'm slacking.
7 for now.
7 books, including Your Body, Your Yoga, but he's most known in the yoga world as one of the premier teachers of Yin Yoga, which is a quiet form of yoga that's known for targeting connective tissues with long holds, relaxed postures, and the ability to promote holistic health and improve energy flow throughout the body. Bernie's been a meditation practitioner since the early 80s and has taught yoga and meditation since 1988 or 98. With a bachelor's degree in science from the University of Waterloo, he combines his intense and deep interest in yoga with his other interest and understanding of the scientific approach to investigating the nature of things, which sounds just like a perfect combination for yoga. Bernie teaches classes, workshops, and teacher trainings, and literally it would not be an exaggeration to say that you have helped literally thousands of people, tens of thousands possibly over that span time, to broaden their understanding of health and life and tap into joy. So I'm so pleased to welcome you, Bernie.
Thank you, Lynn. It's a pleasure to be back.
We're here to talk about one of the interesting new aspects of your work, and that in Yin Yoga, but it's really something that's come to fruition or come to fore lately, and that is the prospect of creating anti-fragility.
Right.
I think fragility is one of those words that we need to define. So can you start by just giving us your definition of fragility, whether it's an inevitability as we age, and then we can delve into what anti-fragility is and how we can use that in a yoga practice. But if we could just start by talking about why we need anti-fragility.
Yeah, fragility, most people have a fairly good working knowledge of what the word means. Basically, if something's fragile, stress can break it. Whether that stress comes from changes in life, chaos, uncertainty, something that's fragile doesn't take much pressure, stress, load, exercise before it breaks. Either it'll have a little break or it'll completely shatter. A good example is dropping a glass vase onto the floor. The glass vase is fragile, and hitting the floor, there's a huge stress there. It'll just shatter into little shards of glass all over the place. And that's generally the case for things that aren't organic, that aren't alive. But living organisms, they aren't fragile generally. They're what we call anti-fragile. It's the opposite part of the spectrum. Most people think the opposite of fragile is robust. When something's robust, like a cast iron pewter mug that you might get in Oktoberfest somewhere drinking beer, you drop that on the ground, the beer just spills, but the mug's okay because it's made of iron, it's robust. Whereas a glass will just shatter. But the actual opposite of fragile is anti-fragile. And these are things that gain from disorder. They actually become stronger. Well, that's the difference between a living organism, which through exercise and stress gets stronger and more adaptable, and something that's inorganic like your computer or your car or other mechanical devices that over time wear out. And hopefully we don't wear out. We can get stronger and stronger. And in the scientific world, there's a specific term for that. There's an acronym, SAID, specific adaptation to imposed demand. So if you want to get stronger and more anti-fragile, you need to increase demand. You need to exercise, or you need to stress.
You know what you reminded me of? I don't know the name of these vases. You know the Japanese vases that they break and then they solder the pieces together and the vase becomes stronger?
That's very much like our bones. If you break a bone and it heals again, it's actually stronger in the healed area.
Yeah, is there, in the term anti-fragility, is there some sense that things break, but they don't have to actually, the bone doesn't have to actually break. They can be a life stressor, right? Because
correct.
I have heard you speak about the organs and the tissues and emotion and everything. So the stressor or the thing that breaks doesn't have to actually physically break, right?
No, you don't want to take it past its edge. In yoga, we have this concept of an edge, and I like to think of that like a cliff. You're climbing up a side of a mountain. It's a lot of work. Exercises work, but if you go too far too fast, you might fall over the edge, and that's where death and destruction awaits. So we don't want to go there, but we want to be on this side of the mountain where, you know, we're exercising, it's climbing the mountain, it's hard work, we're getting stronger from it. But let's not go so far that we actually fall off the edge and break. So in yoga, we play our edges. We don't go over our limit, we go towards our limit. So that requires knowing where your edge is.
Yeah, is the idea of anti-fragility to avoid the breaking things, to recognize and avoid them?
Yeah, you can always do too much. But a lot of people make this into a binary. Just because you can do too much doesn't mean we should do nothing. You could go over the edge of the mountain, but that doesn't mean never climb the mountain. So if you stay down here at the base of the mountain, you're never going to get stronger. So you need to do something, just don't do too much. And a lot of people mistake, well, you could do too much, so let's just stay in bed. Because that way we're never going to get hurt. Well, scientific studies have shown that doesn't actually work. Staying in bed, not moving is one of the worst things you can do for your health.
I'm seeing ER going, what's the use?
Yeah. Don't listen to the donkey.
We know that exercise stresses the system. I mean, that's more of a physical practice. It can be a mental practice as well. It can be a focus practice and all of those things. And we can build a stronger body with exercise. How is this concept different from just pure straight on exercise?
Well, exercise is a component of building anti-fragility. You can think of exercise as exercising your muscles, go into a weight room, do that. And although you might be targeting your muscles, you're going to affect the whole system. By working your muscles, your bones are going to get stronger, your heart's going to get stronger, immune system gets stronger. So just exercise in general is going to have a systemic effect. But we can exercise our body physically, we can exercise our mind, we can exercise our immune system, we can exercise our nervous systems. All these systems in the body need to be stressed. They need to have a load put on them. So don't think of exercise as only the physical movements. You can exercise all parts. All tissues need exercise, just like your liver. I remember my grandmother, when I was young, said everybody needs to eat a peck of dirt when they're young. A peck is an old British term for how much, but I guess from her folklore, you got to get those organisms in to build your immune system. You need to stress the immune system. We're designed to get sick once in a while, so our immune system can get ramped up and get stronger.
Wow.
I'm not recommending everyone eat dirt, but
yeah, that's what
my grandmother's advice.
I kind of stopped at eat the dirt. The question I have, though, is because I have a term that I like to use when I'm teaching, which is useful stress. Because people think of stress and they think it's a bad thing, but it's not a bad thing. It's a necessary thing, which is what you've been talking about.
Yeah, there's a technical term for that useful stress. It's called eustress, EU stress. Too much is distress. So let's not be in distress, but let's be in the eustress part of the equation.
So in a yin concept, in a yin context, which there's a sort of I think of yin as being a really kind of a loving and, you know, I'm not going to say gentle because I don't think gentle, but, you know, a compassionate practice where you're not, you're finding an edge, but you're not pushing.
No, you don't push, but it's still challenging. There's a lot of people who love to hate yin yoga. There are some poses that, like a dragon, if you're holding a dragon pose, which is a lunge type pose for 5 minutes, even though your muscles are relaxed. And so in that way, it's kind of gentle, but there's a lot of sensations coming because we need to stress the joints. We need to stress the ligaments. We need to stress the tendons and the fascia. And that stress is a form of exercise. And a lot of people know when they exercise, it's challenging. the body's kind of saying, no, that's enough. Let's go to bed or let's go watch TV or something. Let's do something easier. Well, just staying for 3, 4, 5 minutes in one of these poses, it's challenging. It's meant to be challenging because that's how we build anti-fragility. We need to apply a stress to a targeted area.
Are there different kinds of stress?
Yeah, there's
I mean, I
technically
don't mean good stress, bad stress. I mean, when
right.
you're applying stress, is there different
Yeah.
kinds of physical?
From an engineering point of view, there's really 5 types of stress that a mechanical engineer would talk about. There's the stress of bending. So here's a ruler. If I do this to it, there's a bending stress. I could also put a torsion into it. I can twist one end, so that puts a twisting stress into it. I could try to stretch it, elongating stress. I could compress it together. That's a compression stress. There's also a shear stress where one force is going this way, the other force is going that way. So there's 5 technical forms of stress. But from a yoga perspective, it always breaks down into 2 portions. It's either the stress of elongation or tension, or the stress of compression. And we use an example of your wrist. And when I dorsiflex the wrist here, depending on the person, I happen to have a kind of a wrist handy here. So here's a left hand. We got the carpal bones, the wrist bones here, and they're sitting on the distal edge of the radius. And if I'm dorsiflexing here, for some people, they get stopped when the 2 bones hit. Now they're in compression. So compression stopping them. And that's not bad. The bones need stress. There are cells that build bone called osteoclasts, and they are stimulated by stress. There's cartilage lining the bones, and that's stimulated by stress. The only way you can build cartilage is by compressing it. But on the other side, we may have tendons and ligaments that are being stretched out. That's why most people have their fingers curled when they do this. That's called a tenodesis. When you bring your hand backwards, most people have to curl their fingers because all these tendons and ligaments are getting stretched here and they're pulling the fingers in. If you go the other direction, if you flex the wrist, notice how your fingers straighten out. That's because the tension on the back of the wrist is pulling the finger straighter. So we have these 2 forms of stress, tension or compression. Now, depending on your unique anatomical structures, some people, the bones hit out here and they can never get their hand to 90 degrees. And they hate handstand and even plank pose and cat-cow because they can't get their hands underneath their shoulders because they just can't dorsiflex there. If it was tension stopping them, over time, you can stretch those tissues out and then get longer and longer. But if it's compression, once I hit the bones, I can't change that. I've reached the limit of what my unique anatomical structures will allow me to do. And it's important to know that that is your ultimate edge. We don't want to go past that. We don't want to go over the cliff because that would just break the body. But if you're only feeling it as tension, well, over time, it may take months, it may take years, but eventually you can stretch out these elongating tissues until you've reached the point of compression. So one of the tricks in yoga is knowing what stops me. It's a mantra. If it's compression, I've accepted that I can't go any further. And no amount of yoga is going to change that. I'll just have to wait for my next life to be able to do a perfect handstand because I just get too much stress there. I'm in distress if I try to go too far. But if it's tension, well, okay, over time, I just have to work through that. It's not comfortable. I'm feeling it. It's challenging. But over time, I can stretch those tissues out.
So you're saying that you can, through practice, figure out whether it's tension, compression, and what the balance is.
Right. It's called paying attention. What are you feeling? If I'm feeling it here in the direction of the movement, I'm hitting compression. If I'm feeling it here in the direction away from the movement, that's tension. And by paying attention, I can figure out what's stopping me. And then I'll know whether it's safe to go further or I'm just have to accept that I've reached a limit of what my body can do.
So in a yin practice, you're creating those stress conditions that would allow someone who's practicing to discover what the edge is. So they don't,
Right.
say, go over the cliff. That what you're doing in the practice is you're looking for the intelligent edge. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. Because that's going to tell you whether you should go further or not. Now, it's not bad to hit compression. This is a misconception a lot of people have. They don't want to go to end range of motion. Well, it's the end range of motion that allows the bones to hit. And it's only when the bones are actually in contact that the bones and the cartilage get stronger. So we don't want to be afraid of end range of motion. We want to be afraid of going past that, because that's
Going
when
past
you
it.
break. Yeah. So how do you know when you're at end range of motion? You have to pay attention.
There. I think what you're saying, though, one reason people avoid it is when I heard you say the bones have to touch the bones, I immediately went bone on bone.
Right.
But that's what you're saying is you need to intelligently create that compression,
Right.
in order to become more anti-fragile.
Right. Think of people that have osteoporosis. The bone density is getting weaker. They're losing trabeculi in the inner bone. And the only way they can get more bone there is to stress the bones. So somebody who has, say, osteoporosis in the hip, their doctor may recommend, well, you got to start walking more because you need to stress the bones together. You need to have that hip socket hitting onto the neck of the femur. You need that compression so that these bones, the cells that live in the bones, are getting the signal through something called piezoelectricity. They feel that stress, they become more activated, and they make more bone. Bones get compressive strength by compression. Cartilage only gets turned on by compression as well. Some bones can be stimulated by tension, but mostly bones are stimulated by compression, and cartilage is only stimulated by compression. So if you're starting to get weaker cartilage, and you get the beginnings of osteoarthritis, you need to stress the bones, but not too much, because you're weaker now. You could go too far. It's a smaller mountain. You can get up to the cliff very quickly, but we never want to not climb the mountain.
I feel that's a somewhat different approach from what a lot of people say about arthritis, which is you need to get the bones away from each other. And that's because the intervertebral space, for example, in the spine is diminished.
Yeah.
So I think if I'm understanding this correctly, in a controlled situation, which was what you'd be in a yin class, you are creating that compression, but you're not suggesting then go out and then sit slumped and, be compressed.
No, again, you can do too much. So a lot of people with these conditions where there's osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, they become afraid of doing anything.
Exactly.
So they do nothing, which is just a guarantee that they're going to atrophy. Yes, so you got to do something. You could do too much. Somebody with a condition, they can only climb a small mountain. When you're young and healthy, you can climb a really big mountain. You can put a lot of stress into your system. That's great. Well, now I'm older, I've got a condition. I still shouldn't stay in bed. I got to get up, I got to move. Motion is the lotion of life. If I need to stress the tissues, I'm just going to have to pay more attention now as to how much can I tolerate. But you still need to use stress. You have to be careful of going into distress, but zero stress is an unhealthy recipe for life.
Is there anyone for whom this approach is contraindicated because they're too far gone? Is it ever too late to?
The only studies I've ever seen of this, unfortunately, there's not a lot of studies of yoga and these conditions. But I remember reading in Lancet about 10 years ago. Lancet is the English journal of medicine, like the New England Journal of Medicine. And they looked at this hypothesis that certain conditions, you should just have bed rest, pure bed rest. Like from the 1900s to the 1930s, it was assumed that all women after childbirth should just have bed rest, like for 3 months, just stay in bed. And they discovered by the 1930s, this was the worst recipe possible. So today, after a woman's given birth, she's encouraged to get up right away within a few hours. Okay, dear, let's get up and walk around. So they wanted to see, did that apply to every condition? Or were there certain conditions where this was not indicated? And their results were that every condition requires stress. So it doesn't matter what disease you have, what condition you have, how old you are, you still need to get out of bed. You still need a bit of stress. Now, again, some people can only tolerate very little stress. Just getting out of bed into the chair might be enough for them. Other people, okay, here's a walker. Let's use that, but you got to walk. You got to do what you can do. Other people can go out and run a marathon. Okay, they got nice, healthy bodies, but even the worst broken down bodies still need to exercise, or they're just going to atrophy.
That's so interesting because I'm old enough to remember when people with back pain were told to lie flat on their backs for weeks and months at a time. And now look at what they do. They say, get off the back, do not lie down. So it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. And in the context of yin, it sounds like you're also saying it's adaptable to wherever you are in your life and in your skill level and in your body, because you're listening, you're paying attention.
That should be the formula for yoga in general. But the beauty with yin is we have time. Like if I have somebody who's a raw beginner to yoga, I'd much rather they come to my yin class, because my yin class, I have 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of stillness where I can explain to them all these things. If they come to my hatha class, where we're only in a pose for 5 breaths, and then we have to move to another pose and then to another pose, I don't have time to explain all this to them and for them to really feel what's happening in their body. Because they're just worrying, like they're in down dog, what hand, where goes where, foot where? They're just worried about all these mechanical things. Whereas in yin, you're in a pose, you're just soaking in here. And now you can start to feel what's going on in your body. You've got time to pay attention.
Is that why yin, do you prefer yin as the anti-fragility practice, or do you also use it in your mat classes? The concept that you're talking about with the stress and the
well, to me, yoga is not really what you do, it's how you do what you do. So my yoga practice evolved a lot over the years. I lift weights because that's the best way to strengthen the muscles and the bones. I will run sprints because that's the best way to really stress the heart. I will do yin for mobility. All these things can be yoga. Before lifting weights, you can sit in meditation and mindfulness, and then you can mindfully lift and then do a shavasana at the end. You can do the same with running up and down stairs in your home or riding a bike or whatever. All of this can be made into a yoga. So it doesn't always have to be yin. So I do yang forms of yoga and yin forms of yoga. My muscles need more resistance training. I'm not going to get that in the yin practice. My bones and cartilage need more compression, and that I can get more in the yin practice. But, so one's not better than the other. It's just targeting different tissues. Well, you need to target them all.
This is good news because you're going to be teaching an upcoming class for us. One of the 3-part classes called Finding Your Intelligent Edge. And it's about developing soft tissue resilience, which is this concept of anti-fragility. And it sounds like you're not going to be teaching only how to do it in a yin practice, but really how to do it on a human body. Yes. In any practice. Is that right? Can you talk?
That's right. I'll be sharing both the yin and yang type of poses and guiding people into how to figure out what their edge is. So that's why it's called Finding Your Intelligent Edge. So the emphasis isn't so much just on the edge, but it's on you. And everybody is different. Everybody's bones are different. How far you can dorsiflex your wrist is going to depend on something at the end of the radius called the palmar tilt. So some people have a tilt like this, some people are more flat. People with flat, they can dorsiflex a lot. People that got more of a tilt, they're going to go to here. So your body is unique. Nobody has your biography and your biology. So the trick is, how do you figure out what your edge is? That's what we're sharing in both yin ways and yang ways.
I think it relieved so many people who could never do a squat. Right. For me, it was the jump through. I could never do a jump through. And then I realized my arms are too short. I'm never going to do a jump through. It's never in this lifetime. That's not going to happen.
Right.
That we tend to think that we have to adapt to a pose when really the pose is just a vehicle to adapt to.
And we should adapt the pose to the body.
Exactly.
We don't use the body to get into the pose. We use the pose to get into the body.
Now, in your course, there's going to be a practice as well, right? Are you leading, what kind of a
Yes.
practice are you leading?
That practice will be yin because we want to have time to figure out where our edges are. So again, with yin, the beautiful thing about yin is we have time to notice, is what's stopping me tension or is it compression? And how does that change as I go deeper into the pose? How does it change if I slightly change the pose into another pose? So for the trying to figure out where my edge is, we're going to use yin. But these principles can be applied whether it's a yin pose or a yang pose.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to the course, and I'm especially looking forward to the practice because I think that's going to be super interesting for anyone who's a human being living in a body with gravity. I think it's reassuring to hear, oh, it's not your fault.
Right.
That deck was stacked.
Yeah, you didn't choose your parents, your DNA.
Say that to people. If you want to get six-pack abs, it's quite simple. You just need to go back and get different parents.
Yeah. I mean, they're probably there. They just got other things over top of them.
Thank you so much. And it's been fascinating. And I'm looking forward to learning more about eustress and putting ourselves back together, or at least not falling apart, figuring
Right.
out to not fall apart. So thank you, Bernie, and we'll see you in class.
Thank you, Lynn.